Welcome back, and thank you again to the speakers on our first two panels for a terrific start to the conference. I'd like to welcome, in addition to our in-person and online audience that's already been with us, welcome to my criminal law class. And as always, my criminal law students, please
I'm sorry. We are going to be starting the Judicial Perspectives panel. If everyone could please take a seat.
My criminal law students, just want to say, as you know, I know a lot of judges. I've worked for some judges, including some judges here, and I've appeared before a number of judges. I am so pleased and honored that we have with us three of my favorite judges in the world. So I'm very much looking forward to this panel. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Myra Berman. I'm the Associate Dean for Experiential Learning here at Touro, and therefore I am very much in awe of the three judges that are sitting on the bench: Judge Bianco, Judge Freier, and Judge Preska. These are the three judges that will be speaking to you over the next 45 to 60 minutes. You'll be hearing from these extraordinary jurists, each with a multidimensional perspective on the topics being discussed at this conference. Their biographies, you can read them online. Go on to Google, you will find each and every one of them. They are extensive in the legal profession, and I urge you to read them. These are three exceptional individuals. First on the program is Judge Joseph Bianco. Judge Bianco has been a judge for about 20 years, part of the time as a United States District Judge for the Eastern District of New York, and currently a judge on the United States Circuit Judge for the Second Circuit of the United States. Prior to that appointment, he served as in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, and then became Chief of Organized Crime and Terrorism Unit, and ultimately wound up in D.C., and was subsequently appointed to the court. But as important as his legal background and his bio is his attachment to this law school, which is huge. He was a participant actively in our federal court observation program. Everyone that was a 1L met Judge Bianco. He participates in our national moot court competition. He takes on externs from the law school. He has done pretty much everything that any law school could wish for in terms of working with students and preparing them as future attorneys. But his love and his passion is for the youth, not just of this area, but for the youth of the entire region and the entire country. And he will be speaking to you in a couple of weeks, asking you to help him in furthering that objective. So without further ado, Judge Bianco.
Thanks so much, Myra, for that kind introduction. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here. It's such a pleasure to come to Touro, and what a great conference. I want to thank Sam for putting it together, such great speakers and topics, and to be with this panel. Judge Preska, when I was a federal prosecutor in the mid-90s, I appeared before her many times, did many trials before, and there is not a more fair, thoughtful, and wonderful judge than Judge Preska, so it's a real privilege to be with her. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to meet Judge Freier today as well. What I thought I would do with my 15 minutes is talk to you about why I think what you are all doing in your work in this area of the law is so important. And I'm going to talk from both a personal perspective and a judicial perspective about why that is. Because you are, as my slideshow says, a voice for the voiceless in some of the most impactful ways. I'm going to start from the personal standpoint. So about 12 years ago, we had 5 kids, and I went to my wife and I said, I think we should adopt a little boy. And she said, what are you, crazy? We didn't have space, we didn't have money. It costs a lot of money to adopt a child, over $30,000. But it's just something I felt compelled to do. I filed a motion for reconsideration. I'm a good advocate, and she agreed. So we went to an adoption agency. We're both in our late 40s, and I said, I don't care what country It's got to be fast, and it has to be that only one parent has to go. Many countries make both parents go multiple times, and we had 5 kids, not possible for us. And they said, okay, China. China, it's going to be quick, and only one parent needs to go. So they matched us up with a little boy. I don't know how much you know about China, but in their orphanages, 85% are special needs children in their orphanages. 50,000 kids in orphanages and 85% special needs. So I actually give you a list of ailments. It's kind of a crazy thing to check off which ailments you think you could handle as a family. So you have to Google these things that you never even heard of. But they matched us up with this little boy, Hong Liang. That's a picture from the orphanage. You can see the other kids in the background. And you don't get a lot of information. There's basically one piece of paper about his history in the orphanage file, a police report. They found him on the streets when he was a couple of days old. The police report says we brought him to the orphanage, to this orphanage. They gave him the name Hong Liang, and that's where he was for the first 2 years of his life. That's a really dark place, that orphanage. China obviously does not spend a lot of money on their orphanages. They just warehouse these kids. He had a severe cleft palate. If he opened up his mouth at that point, you would have seen a gigantic hole in the top of his mouth that would have never got fixed in China. And he has severe autism. We knew he had social development issues. We did not know how severe until he arrived in the United States. But that orphanage, he weighed under 20 pounds at age 2, skin and bones, malnourished. He was still drinking from a bottle. When we received him, he wouldn't know what a hug was. If you tried to hug him, he would flip his back. He was uncomfortable with a hug, and if you tried to give him that bottle in your arms like a baby, he wouldn't take it. You had to lay him in the crib on his back, because that's the only way he had ever received a bottle, was alone on a crib. He had no hope, but my wife went over. This is funny. I thought I was going to go, but they said, well, if you're not going to be the primary caretaker, your wife has to go. And I'm like, Melissa, you have to go. So she went 6,000 miles. That's an iconic Bianco family photo, her arriving at Kennedy Airport. We're greeting her with Hong Liang. This is really funny. 2 of my boys there, who are now both in college, I wanted them to be invested in this. So I said, you can give him his new name. We're going to make Hong Liang his middle name. And they went into their room like they were picking the Pope. They closed the door. Hours later, they come out and they're like, we got it, Hector. I'm like, Hector Bianco from China? This kid's going to have no chance. So I overruled that, and he is George, after my father-in-law. The cleft palate got fixed immediately. That was not hard. He became a U.S. citizen. One of my favorite things is to do the naturalization ceremony, because it has such a special meaning to our family. I'm a deacon in the Catholic Church, so I got to baptize him. That's the day of his baptism. People think I just like wearing robes, white on Sunday, black during the week, but that was a very special thing. And we quickly realized that the autism, neurologists, DNA testing, all types of things, try to figure out what it was exactly. But this is, he's been with us for 10 years now. He's nonverbal. He has a talking iPad. He has a secret sign language, so when I go home today, he's going to go like this. That means swing. And then he's going to, after going on the swing, no matter how cold it is, I'll dig it out in the snow, because he'll still want to go. He'll go like this and like this. That's chocolate milkshake. This is French fries at McDonald's, and that's what he does. But he's transformed our whole family. People say he's lucky to be in the United States, a U.S. citizen with a family that loves him, and that's obviously all true. But I always add, we're blessed to have this little boy, because he's taught us more about life than anybody ever could. It shows that love can penetrate anything. As challenging is autism, and we didn't know anything about autism before George, we know that he knows how much we love him, and he loves us. And there's just a smile, this pure smile that he has, that when he is happy, it's just pure. It's really pure. He has this smile. There's that smile. My daughter, this just shows you how you don't know how you could be transformed. She's a speech pathologist. She was in high school when we adopted him, and she didn't know what she wanted to do with her life, and she's a speech pathologist because of George. So he's had a huge impact on her. There he is. He has these teacups that he taps all the time, all day, 24 hours a day. It makes him happy. I know he's up in the morning because I hear the cups going. So that's kind of a cute thing about George. But he literally, until about a year ago, could not enter a store. He's too he had trauma and autism on top of each other. And we would go through the drive-through McDonald's, but if he got to the threshold of the store, he would literally, even though he wanted to go in, he couldn't go in. And a year ago, he got past that. So now he's on his iPad. He says, "George for a walk, McDonald's, George for a walk." That means he wants to go inside. So just a few months ago, he went to my favorite place, IHOP, for the Cinestack pancakes. So it's been a wonderful journey with this little boy, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out. But where all you come in is, school is his life. And he got thrown out of BOCES, basically. They're like, "We can't handle him." He had some self-injurious behavior issues, not some, a lot. And we were in a point where, like, what are we going to do? And we've moved 3 times. We've gone to 3 different school districts. And I've sat in those IEP meetings. And I'm a federal judge. And I find those meetings very intimidating. Like, so much is riding on those meetings. If he doesn't get into the school that he needs to get into and get the services, he's not going to be able to thrive. He's not going to be able to be the little boy that God created him to be. But he's in a great school now. These are his teachers. He loves those teachers. I keep telling him they can never leave. No career advancement for any of you. This is him on Halloween. And he loves going to school. Like, he just loves being with them. So the ability of him to be in a school with teachers who are like angels is life-changing, but it can't happen unless there are lawyers out there who are doing this type of work. And some school districts, I'm not making the school districts the bad guy, some of them are wonderful and they're encouraging and supportive, but when they're not living up to their obligations under the law, there has to be someone out there. And it's daunting because it can cost a lot of money. Parents lay out the money for the schooling and then try to sue the school and get the money back, but that's a really hard thing for a family to do. But I know there are many, many lawyers out there making sure that school districts live up to their obligations under the law. The other part of this that I've seen as a judge is kind of amazing field trips. I'm the civics czar for the Second Circuit. Some people are known for their legal opinions. I'm known for throwing a good field trip. But our typical field trip, we put the kids in a jail cell. Look how happy they are. It's so disturbing. They love going into the jail cell. We do a Cinderella trial. That's the glass slipper. I have lines in there. If the glass slipper doesn't fit, you must have quit. You can't handle the truth. All these great lines that they don't quite know why everybody is laughing. They come into the courtroom and they participate in the naturalization ceremony, which is something that they never forget. I've done hundreds of these, but when schools come in, especially the grammar schools, 5th grade is one of the ages that I do, I see many public schools have blended classes where I see in the audience special needs kids with AIDS. And when you do the Cinderella trial, it's just a script, but you have to be able to read well. So I tell the teachers, okay, I need someone to play Cinderella, I need someone to play the prince, and I say, but for the judge doesn't have to read. I want you to pick a special needs kid to be the judge. And oh my gosh, it is amazing. They'll look at me, and a smile comes over the special needs teacher. I know exactly who to pick, and she'll pick some kid out, and you're the center of attention. You get to put on the robe. You get to be in the center of the room. Here's a kid. That's not a real gavel. That's a fake gavel there. But I can't tell you how priceless that moment is. The look on that kid, when you put the robe on the kid, and the other students, they understand the moment. They understand this kid feels wanted and belongs. A masterpiece of God's creation just for a moment, and they start cheering. All of a sudden, the kids will start cheering, hey, Billy, way to go, Billy. And it's just this, it makes you want to cry to see this moment. In fact, one time, a kid came up after the trial was over, because I just whisper in there what to say. They don't have to read anything. And a kid was like, "That was great, you were so good." And I said, "Wow, you're the best classmate ever." Cheering on your classmate like that. He said, "Judge, that's my brother." It was his brother, and he almost had like tears in his eyes. He was so excited to see his brother have that moment. I just had this happen last week. I did a 5th grade field trip. It happens every single time, and it just shows you how important it is that those kids are in that school. They're not being warehoused. They're in those schools, and again, at their own level, whatever they're able to achieve, whatever their gold medal is a gold medal. What I'll end with is I wanted to just bring in special needs classes on their own. This is the Carmen Road School in Massapequa. These kids all have pretty severe mental or physical issues. And I was concerned. This just shows you my limitations. I was like, what am I going to do? I can't do my normal PowerPoint. The Cinderella trial, they're not going to be able to do that. So I was worried, how am I going to occupy these kids for 3 hours? And that was the greatest field trip ever. I became friends with them. They would come back every year. I went to their graduation. They had, again, just like George, this was before George, pure joy. Pure joy. And, when we put them in the jail cells, you could see the wheelchairs are too big. You can't get them in the way. Everyone wants to go in the jail cells. So they put the teacher in. We closed the cell, and this is the guy in the middle, Caesar. I thought he wasn't getting anything out of it. He kind of had his head down the whole field trip, and I'm like, okay, he's just not at a level where he understands, like, what's going on here. And the marshal gave Caesar one of those big keys and said, Caesar, it's time for us to go back out here. You're going to open up the cell and let your teacher out. And he held up the key with a big smile, and he said, not today. So he knew exactly what was going on. And this other guy, Anthony, who has cerebral palsy, he wanted to be cuffed. They all want to be cuffed with the marshal's cuffs. And he could not, he had control over his hands. So he was putting his hands in the air, but they were like this. And the teacher said, Anthony, let me bring your hands together. And he said, no. And he literally, it took about 30 seconds, was taking every bit of strength he had to get his hands close enough so that the cuffs could go on. And that was, we all had tears in our eyes. That was a gold medal moment for Anthony. So these moments await us in all these different aspects of life, whether it be school, employment. I told Judge Preska, I checked this morning on Westlaw how many disability-related cases I've had as a district judge, a circuit judge, over 150 opinions. Those are opinions, no, many more. Judge Preska, forget it, 1,000 probably. But whether it be in employment, whether it be Social Security disability, whether it be schools, the work in this space is so meaningful and so important. And I want to thank all of you for contributing to that in whatever part of that space you're in, because you're making a difference in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. I've known the judge for 20 years now, sitting around his courtroom constantly. This is the first time he brought me to tears. Thank you, Judge. I've neglected to mention the CLE code when we started. It is M as in Mary, A as in Alex, U as in umbrella, 289. MAU 289. Next on the program is the Honorable Rachel Freier, known as Rachi Freier to many people. She's been serving as a Supreme Court Justice in Kings County since January of 2023. Judge Freier's appointment is a significant milestone because she is the first Hasidic Jewish woman to hold public office in the United States, not just in the region, in the United States. She previously served as a civil court judge for the Kings County 5th Judicial District and has a background in real estate law and community activism, which certainly shows in her activities. Judge Freier's commitment to public service and her advocacy for the Hasidic community are well known, and she has been recognized for her contributions to the legal field and the community at large. In addition to being a Supreme Court justice, Judge Freier is a volunteer paramedic and the founder and director of Ezra's Nasim Volunteer Ambulance Service, the first all-women's ambulance corps. Ezra's Nasim has been featured in the documentary film 93 Queen. She is, I don't know how, but she manages to find ways to integrate all of her incredible commitments and her passion for public service into an incredibly busy personal life as well. Today, as you can see in the program, she will be sharing her perspectives on guardianship proceedings. Judge Freier?
All right, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. Can you all hear me? Can you all see me? Sometimes when I go to speak, they don't always see me. I was once invited to speak at a synagogue in Florida, and they had me stand on the stool that the bar mitzvah boys who don't reach the top. But I'm glad that you can see me and hear me. So I know I have 15 minutes. I don't know where I'm supposed to get the reminder, but there's so much that I that I want to share with you, but I will try to put it all short into 15 minutes. I know that you are going to be getting CLE credits, and I know that I have to talk a little bit about the law, not just my life. So I will just tell you that I now preside in the guardianship part, and I prepared for you basically an outline of what happens in the guardianship case from commencement to termination. What's amazing about guardianship is that for me, it's an interplay of law and medicine and helping people who are disabled, vulnerable, in need of medical assistance. So for me, it's like my passion is absolutely combined in this. What I also want to share with you is how I got here, how I got appointed into this. And if you would have told me about 15, 20 years ago that I would be walking around with an emergency radio always in my pocket, that I'd have an ambulance parked in front of my house and, run on calls at night, deliver babies in bathtubs, I would have told you, go back to sleep and call me when you wake up, because I'm about law and order and social justice and speaking for the voiceless. Medicine, I know nothing about. How I got involved and how I got onto this journey is a script only God could have written. I don't want to forget, though, to make a point of the amazing opportunity of having a law degree. Whatever you're going to go do in life from now on is going to be enhanced by your law degree. I never could have envisioned becoming a director of a volunteer ambulance service, and it's only because I have that law degree. So I want to wish you all the best of luck, and open up your minds to opportunities that you have never thought of, because they will come your way. People will come to you asking you for help because you have a law degree. You can help them, and you never know how helping another person will change your life, which is what happened to me. Very important. I see it so profoundly in the guardianship part. When you are an attorney representing your client, good lawyering is so important, and good manners is really the crux of good lawyering. Respect the judge, of course, but respect your colleagues, respect your adversaries, because it comes across when I'm sitting on the bench, whether I'm sitting on a virtual bench or sitting in person, the body language of the attorneys, how they speak, how they address the court, and they address each other are so important. And if you mess up and you're not polite, your client may suffer. And if your client is somebody who's vulnerable, it's just such a shame. So know the law, but also know your manners. Okay, now let me tell you about how I got to do what I'm doing and how that led me into the guardianship part. So I started my career in law as a legal secretary at the age of 17 when I graduated high school back in those years. And if you figure out how old I am, it's okay. But when I graduated high school, there were no college opportunities for the Hasidic community. I wasn't going to be a troublemaker or a rabble-rouser. I was a good girl. I took a course to be a secretary, and I became a legal secretary. It wasn't until I turned 30 when I said, gosh, I can't be a secretary my whole life. And at that point, times have changed. The Hasidic community, we're nonconformists. We don't change. But when opportunities change, we are there. And at that point, Touro College had opened up, and I'm a Touro alum, and I'm really so grateful to Touro for giving me that opportunity. It was the stepping stone that I needed to higher education. So I did go to law school after graduating college. I went to college. My first semester, I was expecting my 4th child. So for all of you out there who want to have families and also have a degree, and you can do it, you can. My undergrad took me 6 years, but I loved Touro. Every day in Touro I was just like, I can't believe I'm here. And then I went to Brooklyn Law School because it was close to home. I did part-time, 4 years. I started when I was 30, expecting my 4th child. I graduated Touro with my 6 children. I have 3 boys and 3 girls, just like the Brady Bunch, but 1 husband. And I did manage to raise them, and when I remember in law school, everybody said, we don't want you in our class, we can't complain in front of you, because there I was, my youngest, a set of twins, they were toddlers, but for me it was an opportunity, and it was something that I'm so grateful that I did. But I had naysayers every step of the way. And all of you sitting here and all of your clients that you're going to represent eventually are going to experience what I experienced. People telling you, you can't do it. It's impossible. Ruchi, you cannot do it. There's no way you're going to get through college. It's impossible. You're never going to be able, and then even if you do, you'll never get through the LSAT. And even if you do, you'll never get accepted to law school. And should I go on? And even if you do, you'll never pass the bar exam. And even if you do, who is going to hire you to work for them? A Hasidic woman with 6 children. You'll never be able to work those hard full-time hours. And then even if you do, who's going to come to you as an attorney? Some Hasidic woman from Borough Park. And I kept on saying, if God wants it to happen, it's going to happen. And I kept on just saying, I don't want to be a grandmother and tell my grandchildren, oh, Bobby could have been a lawyer, but I had to try to find my way. And you know something? When the naysayers would tell me all their terrible things of what would happen, that my children wouldn't be stable and they won't know who their mother is, all things not true. Like every kid came to a college class with me. When I had to do like a public speaking, my son who was then 10, he made the speech with me. We presented how to do origami. And then when I went to law school, every kid had a chance to come. Make your kids a part of it. Every kid sat in a law school. When I studied for the bar exam, they made me them flashcards. Anyhow, there was one thing that people said that worried me. They said, even if you get through everything, you won't remain religious and Hasidic. You're going to veer off the path. You won't be able to stick to your values. And that worried me. It didn't worry me until I walked into law school, because that's when I felt like, oh my gosh, this is completely new territory for me. For a Hasidic woman, it was the first time I was in a class that was men and women together. It was the first time that I was going to have professors who maybe aren't familiar with my culture. How will I manage? So I remember I was in the law school cafeteria. I was a student lounge, actually, and I made my deal with God. And I said, dear God, please help me get through law school without compromising my values. And when your children come to me for help, I will help them. And let me tell you, God wasted no time in testing me. Shortly after I graduated, I met a woman from my neighborhood whose son was expelled from school after school. And I said, I'm going to help you, and I got involved with Youth at Risk. And then a couple of years later, I got a random phone call from an EMT who said, we are a group of EMTs and labor coaches, we're doulas, and we want to join the very respected all-male ambulance service in our community, and they don't want to take us in. I remember thinking to myself, who needs them? I mean, the men are doing a great job, but I had to go to their meeting. They asked me to join their meeting, and I said, I had my deal with God. If people want help, I will have to go help them. And I went to this meeting and said to myself, if these women are a group of rabble-rousers, troublemakers, I'm out of here. I walked in, I met women who were conservative. They had their husbands, had synagogues, they were teachers, and I heard a story that I couldn't believe. In my own neighborhood, women weren't being allowed to join as volunteers. I said, what? This is the 21st century. And I advocated for them, and at one point I said, it's going to be malpractice if I don't become an EMT. I became an EMT with my mom. The second time that my mom and I took a class together, the first class we took together was Lamaze. My youngest brother and my oldest son are 6 weeks apart. So we took Lamaze together. My mom, she's my best friend. Anyhow, so we took the class together. Fast forward, I became a paramedic. Fast forward even more, now I'm going to try to get into nursing school part-time because I want to be a more effective director. And I think medicine is so important, and medicine and law really interact. So, law is amazing. All of you have the ability to help other people. People will come to you. You can do so much for them. And you can do so much to make the world a better place. And when you do something for other people, there's this expression in Yiddish that when you do a mitzvah, you think you're helping somebody else, you'll find out one day that you helped yourself. My very first assignment, when I became a judge, I became a civil court judge. I didn't know that the Office of Court Administration puts you where they need you. So 2 weeks before my term started, I found out I'm going to criminal court. So criminal court, I don't know the first thing about criminal law. I grew up without TV. In the Hasidic community, we don't watch TV, go to the movies. When I was in law school, criminal law was my hardest subject because I didn't know the difference between a lineup and a show-up. Anyhow, there I was, sitting on the bench, out come defendants in handcuffs, in jumpsuits, and I say, what do I know? The rap sheets were so thick, they give you 5 minutes to go through a rap sheet, and I don't know anything to help them. How am I going to do it? Anyhow, the two mitzvah projects that I had, Youth at Risk and Women's EMT Service, is what helped me those 2 years. When they would come in front of me with cases, and there would be people, and there were injuries, or there were people that were, I would get these young defendants, and when I looked at them in the eye, I saw the same pain of the youth at risk that I counseled in the Hasidic community. Makes no difference where you come from. You've been through trauma and pain, it's the same. Hasidic community, Asian community, Black communities, we're all the same. And that's what helped me understand I had grown men cry in my courtroom when I would tell them the same thing I told these kids at risk. Never give up on yourself. You can't control who your parents are, but you could control your future. But then the prosecutor would say, but Your Honor, what about the victim and the injuries? I'm sure you don't want to see those injuries. And I would say, I am a paramedic. I want to see those injuries. Show me those x-rays, counselors. But the best experience really is being a mother. I had at one arraignment, both attorneys were arguing, and one tells the other, stop interrupting me. She can't hear us both at the same time. Counselors, I said, I raised 6 children. I can hear you both at the same time. In any case, whatever you do in life, a law degree will be an amazing, amazing thing to have in your back pocket. Working with the vulnerable, working with the disabled in the guardianship part for me has been a privilege. And how did I get a disappointment? One day, we got a call that came in, and I'll end with this story. It was for a transport for a young infant, a little newborn, that was born with an airway problem. And the doctors realized that the best place for this child to have surgery was in Cincinnati Children's Hospital. The baby had to be transported from Brooklyn to Cincinnati. And because the airway problem was so severe, the baby couldn't fly. They had to have an ambulance transport the baby from Williamsburg, Brooklyn to Cincinnati. They called our agency. Would we do it? Now, typically, I don't let my work and my volunteer project collide with each other. But I heard the dispatcher looking for 2 members, because you have to have at least 2 EMTs to go. And only one was able to do it because it was an overnight drive. And I said, oh my God, I have to do it. I'm the director, but I have a busy calendar tomorrow. What am I going to do? I texted my supervisor, and I said, I'm really sorry. There's this little baby. We need to save this baby's life, and there's no one who could take off because all my volunteers have families. I can take off the next day, but I have a busy calendar. Save the baby's life. Don't worry about your calendar, my supervisor said. They hung up the sign. Judge Freier is out today. All cases adjourned administratively for, 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Anyhow, I was able to take that baby to the hospital with another EMT. A couple of weeks later, my supervisor calls me to his chambers. I said, oh no, what did I do? He tells me, you know what, there's been some movement around in the courthouse, and I need to assign a new judge for the guardianship part. Guardianship? I said, I don't know anything about guardianship. He says to me, and whoever doesn't understand Hebrew, I'll translate it. He says to me, you have rachmanis. And that's the Hebrew word for compassion. You'll be a good fit for the guardianship part. And I realized, that transport to Cincinnati, that's what he's referring to. So you never know when you're doing something, an act of compassion, helping a disabled person, helping a vulnerable person, you think, oh my God, I'm gonna lose that job, I'm gonna lose that career opportunity. You never know. That could just be a stepping stone for your success. So good luck to you all. I'm so glad to be here, and I wish you the best of success.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Judge Freier. It's shocking to me, but I'm hearing so many similar things from the 2 judges that have already spoken. The message that when you give so much, you get so much in return. And another message that Judge Freier mentioned that I actually have in my notes because I read a recent interview that Judge Preska gave. And it says, 3 years ago, Judge Preska said, quote, "Don't ever close your eyes to unexpected opportunities," end quote. What have we just heard from Judge Freier? What have we just heard from Judge Bianco? Never close your eyes to unexpected opportunities, and I'm speaking particularly to our students, because if you close your eyes, you're going to miss out on something that might change your life. For Judge Preska, it reflects the road that she has taken. She's a former Girl Scout, a former chemistry major, but she became the Honorable Loretta Preska, serving our nation and our region as a district court judge and as the chief judge of the Mother Court, the Southern District of New York, for more than 30 years. And like our other two judges, Judge Preska has a connection to this law school. At our very first national moot court competition, Judge Preska sat on the finals bench, along with another one of our judges, our former judges, who has since passed, Judge Leonard Wexler. And the two of them spoke with our finalists that came from all over the country, and they made those finalists love New York and want to come back to practice law in New York, coming back to the law school to sit and have lunch with them, various things. That's Judge Preska. We are thrilled to welcome you back to Touro, and I'm sure the audience is going to be thrilled to hear every single thing that you have to say. Judge.
Thank you, Dean Berman. I'm so sorry. And thank you to Touro Law School, and particularly to Professor Levine for bringing me out here today. Have we been inspired by Judge Bianco and Judge Freier? Yes, right? Here we are. Can we just thank them?
I'm sorry, Judge, it's just a little hard to hear. If you could just speak a little into the microphone. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you very much. I would like to talk to you a little bit about how to effectuate all of the wonderful acts that these two judges have talked to us about. First, I'd like to talk to you about a major class action, and then speak a little more generally about trends that we see in the district court in disability rights advocacy. So to me, the paradigm ADEA case has been one, IDEA case is LV against the City of New York, a case that has been pending in our court for more than 20 years. Can you believe that? As you all know, the IDEA requires public schools to make available to all eligible children with disabilities a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. You all know that. It also requires, as you know, the public school systems to develop an appropriate individualized education program for the student, which of course must reflect the student's individualized needs. And you also know that if the parents disagree with the IEP, the parents can request a due process hearing. New York City has opted for a two-level administrative process. The first before an independent hearing officer, and the second before a state review officer. Orders issued by the officers are either final, which is at the end of the administrative process, or pending, which is issued under the stay put provision, which, as you know, means that the child stays put in his or her school. Furthermore, as you know, the Department of Education has to pay a set amount to cover the student's tuition or whatever special education needs the student requires. But until the Department of Education actually cuts a check, families and schools have to front the costs. So the core problem that LV addressed was the Department of Education's failure to cut checks. It was as simple as that. Because the IDEA proceedings can take years to conclude. So the parents are left with two options. First, the parents may leave the child in the school, but without the special services that have been ordered. Or secondly, the parents may unilaterally and at their own financial peril front the costs for whatever has been ordered. So many families, as you can well imagine, are not able to front those costs. And in the case of LV, the plaintiffs were the parents of children with disabilities who had final orders requiring the Department of Education to pay. The problem was, of course, that the department didn't do so. And I will confide to you, not that you need this in confidence, but it was unbelievably disgraceful. The city simply ignored the orders, and worse than that, would schedule, for example, the hearing days between the in front of the independent hearing officer, single day here, couple months later, single day, couple months later, single day. And then at the end of the process, the city would put in no evidence. It was simply for delay. And I'm just telling you, it was disgraceful. So finally, in 2007, can you imagine, an independent auditor was appointed, and the parties entered into a stipulation of settlement. And essentially, the stipulation set benchmarks for what percentage of the orders to pay were effected on time. Well, you can only imagine. The next thing that happened was COVID intervened. And so they said, oh, we can't do it, we can't do it. And then the Department of Education decided that it wouldn't pay anything unless the schools showed the Department of Education that they had an adequate remote learning program. Now, where was that in the statute? Well, needless to say, it was nowhere. It was a made-up requirement that the DOE used to further delay the payments. So what can the court do? As you well know, we are restricted to deciding cases and controversies. We can't just reach out and make up a question that we think we would like to decide. In 2021, so remember now, this is in the midst of COVID, and this made-up requirement is being implemented by the DOE. On the plaintiff's motion, so take note, lawyers, on the plaintiff's motion, the court declared that the city's requirement for this showing of remote learning was not required by the statute and was totally without any legal basis. And in addition, and again, on the plaintiff's motion, the court appointed a special master. The special master made a report, and in 2023, the court ordered the city to implement maybe 41 of the special master's requirements. What is the special master? He's a man named David Irwin, who specializes, and I can't even tell you what the fancy words are, but essentially in organizational analytics. You can only imagine what the bureaucracy of the Department of Education looked like. And one of the things he identified as a root cause of the delays was the lack of any technological system. Among the requirements that were ordered to be implemented was recruiting new staff members to help process the cases, creating a hotline for families to call in with their problems, but most importantly, improving the technology that it uses to process cases, to make it easier to move it through. So for example, what does the parent have to put in? When the order comes out, the individual independent hearing officer, maybe it's a drop-down menu, rather than having to go back and analyze the handwritten order. But the technology was a major part of Mr. Irwin's recommendations. Finally, the city, to its credit, understood that something had to be done, and the school's chancellor told the New York Times that the city had not done enough. And in my view, of particular importance was the fact that the General Counsel of the Department of Education, Elizabeth Vladeck, threw her weight behind the implementation of the special master's requirements. So since then, the city has been complying with about half of the outstanding obligations that the special master has identified. Most of them are dependent on the new technology platform, which was originally to be ready in December, and which I expect will be ready next month. How did this get done? We met with the two sides, right, the plaintiffs' law firms and the Department of Education and the special master, perhaps every 4 months, perhaps every 6 months. It is amazing what you can get done when you sit them in a room and have them talk to each other. So stepping back to look at this big class action, from my perspective, the city really wants to do this. But as you can imagine, moving the bureaucratic ship of state is like moving an ocean liner. But you can ask the court to help. With the changeover in administrations, for example, you often lose the institutional knowledge of the people at the top. But by bringing them in all the time, we have tried to keep this as a top priority for each of the administrations. And so far, it's working. I have to say again, to those of you who are working on these kinds of cases, the special master was invaluable in helping to analyze what was going on, suggest ways to fix it, and identify steps to be taken so that we could then measure the progress. When he had a IT person who supervised the building of this new platform and the whole thing. But it was completely unbelievable, and I commend to you the activities of both the Plaintiffs' Council and the City Department of Education. Now, what do you want to, let's talk about a little more general trends in ADA litigation that we see in the district court. One of the things that I see that's often difficult for plaintiffs' counsel is surviving summary judgment. You know, many plaintiffs are not able to afford an expert to testify about diagnoses, damages, accommodations, and the like. Instead, many plaintiffs' lawyers offer their clients' own testimony. The ADA plaintiff, for example, might testify that a particular accommodation was available and would have solved that plaintiff's needs. Sometimes the plaintiff might testify about oral comments of a discriminatory nature to help avoid summary judgment in the case. I'd like to make a couple of observations. First, as Judge Bianco and his colleagues have said time and time again, a plaintiff's own testimony is sufficient to defeat summary judgment. So I've seen a lot of cases where, for example, plaintiff's lawyer doesn't lay the foundation for that. For example, obviously the defense is going to take the plaintiff's deposition. Don't pass on the opportunity to cross-examine your plaintiff. Your plaintiff can give sworn testimony that will establish the elements of the claim and provide a factual basis for a denial of summary judgment. Don't forget to do that. It's cheap, it's easy. Or put in an affidavit to allow your plaintiff to establish a disputed issue of fact to defeat summary judgment. Sometimes you'll see that a plaintiff's lawyer will rely on contradictory evidence by the plaintiff. And you all know the sham affidavit doctrine, which says you can't rely on contradictory plaintiff's evidence to avoid summary judgment. So obviously you're going to prepare your plaintiff not to give contradictory evidence. You're going to prepare your plaintiff to give the evidence you need to avoid summary judgment. In addition, obviously, you can point the judge to other evidence establishing the availability of the accommodation or whatever, if you are not in a position to rely on your plaintiff's evidence. So that's number one. Number two, one of the things we're seeing these days is shotgun pleading, where a plaintiff will try to state an ADA claim and then bootstrap onto that the state claims and the city claims, which, as you know, are more lenient than the ADA claim. Sometimes plaintiffs don't think hard enough when doing that. And the result is, after lots of expensive and time-consuming motion practice, the federal claim is dismissed. And then at least most judges in our district take a look and say, okay, I've dismissed all the federal claims. I decline supplemental jurisdiction over the state and city claims. And then where are you? You're 2 years into it and you're back at state court. So think long and hard before you bootstrap your claims. I have one, are we ready? Yeah. How many? 1 minute? 2 minutes, all right. The only other thing I was going to talk about is settlement. There is no weakness in asking for a settlement conference. I mean, I ask about settlement early and often because I think that takes away from any stigma of asking for it. Ask. Often you can get done in no time whatsoever an accommodation for your client that's better even than the outcome of the litigation. So don't forget to ask about settlement. I yield the 30 seconds I have left.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Professor Dean Berman.
So we are running a couple of minutes late. I assume we do not have time for questions? Is that correct? No time for questions. So let's just thank this incredible panel of 3 judges, and let me give you the CLE, the second code. The second code is P as in Peter, L as in Larry, Q as in quest. And we have reached and satisfied our quest for this particular part of the conference. Thank you again, judges.